Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Great to have you. I hope you and yours are all well and enjoying I was going to say the summer weather, but it's not exactly been summer this week, has it? But I hope everything's going well with you. An interesting week, and we've got the gang together again. And it's been an amazing week, Phil. Nicola Sturgeon, it's been revealed, who, we've got to say that the SNP and the leadership of the SNP have looked after Nicola Sturgeon. And Humza and John Swinney in particular, when he was our deputy, while he was looking, using his redactor pen, he's not allowed a thing to be said about her, kept all her policies in place, protected her. In fact, he's put her and his party ahead of our country and its, striving for independence. And yet, Sturgeon, who has thrown everything and everyone under the bus, now throws Swinney and the SNP under the bus for their campaign, which she said lacked vision or big picture thinking. And she went further, Phil, before you answered. She went on to say, as you can see here, that it was the Scottish Greens, in my view, who came closest to injecting a sense of hope for the future into the campaign, meaning her party, the party she was in as a child. Remember when she knocked on the door of, I've forgotten her name, that's terrible, were not injecting a sense of hope for the future.
Kay Ulrich.
That's it, Kay Ulrich. They don't cower in the face of pressure from the right-wing media or corporate vested interests, meaning that John Swinney and the SNP cower in the face and pressure from the right-wing media and corporate invested interests. And I think the Greens win respect from all the people, even who don't support them, meaning there's no respect for the SNP. Now, there's been betrayals, there's been betrayers, but she takes the biscuit, does she not, Phil?
She has done for the 9 years she was First Minister and the 13 years she was, or umpteen beyond that, leader of the SNP. Since Alex handed over the keys, as I keep saying, of our freedom, the golden keys, and she promptly sold them and sold us down the Swanee. Contrast, if you will, Alex modus operandi versus Nicola, because I worked and obviously know them both. Alex better, I knew Alex a lot better than I knew Nicola, because Nicola refused to... Politics, there's an internal cabal, internal trusted, and there's circles of other levels of engagement or people of or levels of trust, if you will. Alex was harsh but fair, tough on you to your face. Nicola would barely speak to you and just go behind your back and throw you under the bus if there was a slight opportunity or possibility that her name or reputation would be tarnished, you would be thrown under the bus.
In her opinion.
Correct, in her opinion, but not just that. In her opinion, if that were the case, because she was the leader at the time, since the referendum in 2014, she got all of her staff and the whole of the SNP management was set up to follow her will. There's one insight was we had one debate. It happened once when we all went down. The 56 out of the 59 came down to Westminster, and we went into Westminster Hall and we had a debate several hours long with all of us, including Nicola Sturgeon, as to what we would do about intervening in England only. This is the Evil. Remember Evil, just after 2014, implemented by Cameron, with its English laws for all that kind of stuff, right? For England only, and why would we give a damn about letting anybody else vote on what's important for England? The complete flip. He obviously completely turned on as the next morning, as the Queen purred down the phone to him that the Scots had voted no. But anyway, it was up for debate. Nicola put her position forward, and we spoke honestly. I spoke. There was very few of us didn't put forward a point or didn't put their thoughts forward. It took hours. She almost lost. She almost lost. And it never happened again. Right? Now that's what you're talking about here. So, and you're looking at a woman. I mean, she's throwing Swinney and the SNP under the bus. What did you expect? You did it, she was told, for the full duration that you served under her government. Well, government, come on to that later. The mainstream media are now calling it a Scottish executive again. If you remember, Alex Cannelly changed the name when he went in from Scottish executive to Scottish government and created an organisation that proved that we could run ourselves and was efficient. What did she do? She's now prompting because of the chaos under her rule and her abject failure to get us even one step closer to independence. She is now inviting inviting us to be called a big council, as we've been keeping coming on mentioning, because that's really what the Scottish government are, because they don't have the levers, they don't have the power, because it's retained. It's retained by the Westminster government. So devolution is cutting the feet from under us. But Alex made a great fist of it and proved that we could actually run our own affairs efficiently and effectively. She screwed that up completely. It's completely turned around. And now some of the mainstream media are calling the Scottish government the Scottish executive again, because that's how they're behaving. That's how crap Nicola Sturgeon has been. But anyway, even the Herald states that John Swinney was always Nicola Sturgeon's fixer. Okay? What does that mean? Well, we know what it means. The loyal deputy who took tough roles in education and COVID recovery so that as leader she could excel until she stepped in, of course, and took all the glory. So why is Sturgeon now turning on her fiercest backer and the SNP, the party she claims to love? Well, the first thing from an observational point of view is she's got no one else left to throw under the bus. She now lives down in London, is doing book tours, and frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. She's welcome to leave. Don't want her back. I'm happy to see the back of her. The less we talk about her, the better. The more insignificant she is, the better, because she is not a representative of the freedom fighters that Scotland should be and must be proud of, and we must continue to work together. And that's about unification. She did more to destroy the unification that Alex built in 2014 than any other single individual or in. And that is why, to her eternal shame, she should not return to Scotland. You're not welcome. But anyway, the fixer right enough, because John Swinney was Nicola's fixer. He helped to stitch up Alex from within the party that Alex had led within touching distance of victory. But instead of graciously accepting that baton, those golden keys to Scotland's future we could have been proud of, in the last 13 years, she first sold the golden keys to a free Scotland and walked away from the final battle for independence over the 9-year period when all the odds were in our favour. She did not come up with a plan A, never mind her bollocks plan B that she's coming out with now, to take us to independence. Why? Well, if you watch this show, you'll know why, because she's captured. So if you know that, let everybody you talk to know why, and let's make people power count again.
Yeah. God, just on the evil thing, me personally, what I would have done when they introduced evil, because at that time, the SNP, as you said, 56 out of 59, were riding high. Westminster was still nervous. I'd have said, my members of parliament are leaving the building today. They will not be back until you drop this shit. And they would have dropped it overnight, and they would have kept the SNP with them, would have had the controlling hand, they would have had the boot to stick it in. But no, cowardice. But here's the thing. She talked about the lack of vision or big picture thinking, Eva. You know, unlike her campaigns, which when did she ever show the big picture? And in fact, she never had a plan B. That was always been one of her big complaints about her. You don't have a plan B. You know, we didn't even know what plan A was, but we didn't know what plan B. But then suddenly, out of the blue, she's setting out her plan now. After she's out of office and she's down in London swallowing cocktails with her book friends and her literary friends. And suddenly now she's got a plan B. She was kicking people out the party for daring to ask for a plan B. Hypocrite, traitor. betrayer.
I was laughing there, but it's really far from funny when you consider what she's been responsible for, and the very moribund, dreadfully hopeless fashion in which she led the party and led the country for so long. So I hate to say I told you so, but those of us here did tell people years ago what was going on and they wouldn't listen. Well, it's come to pass. It's clearly come to pass. I mean, the headline, for example, at the BBC is Sturgeon's criticisms of Swinney reveal tensions in the SNP ranks. He was her loyal deputy for almost a decade, a trusted ally through the highs and lows of Sturgeon's tenure as First Minister, from her fallout with Alex Salmond to the COVID pandemic and gender self-ID. John Swinney was right there next to her. Even in the wake of Peter Murrell's conviction for embezzlement, John Swinney resisted criticising Sturgeon's oversight of the party's governance, blah, blah, blah. In fact, John Swinney's support was so steadfast, Sturgeon once described him as the most important person in her life outside of her family. And now John Swinney's ministers are being embarrassed, live over the telly when they're being asked to comment on her assessment of his leadership at the recent election campaign. So I think it was perhaps Mary McCallan who was asked first, and she said that Sturgeon's assessment was nonsense. Now that's quite telling, because Mary McCallan is where she is as the result of being promoted by Sturgeon. Mary McCallan was a SPAD, an advisor to Sturgeon before she was a candidate and elected in 2021. And she's obviously been a government minister for several years now. The next one to be asked was Angela Constance, who dissociated herself from Sturgeon entirely. And I find that quite interesting, given that she too was promoted by Nicola Sturgeon. So slowly, bit by bit, they're all being picked off and they'll all be asked to give their opinion. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Jenny Gilruth has to say. And I just can't wait for Shirley Ann Somerville to be asked her opinion. So these people supported the Sturgeon line. They all supported the gender ideology. She clearly thinks now that the Greens would be a better political home for her than the SNP. So let's look forward to seeing her joining the Greens. But if you've got to that stage in your political career, because she says although she's out, she's not really out because she can't stay away. If you've got to the stage where the Scottish Greens are your best fit, there's something very seriously wrong with you. In the context, not just of their gender ideology, but all their other stuff that they narc on about, that they cost the country an awful lot of money on, whether it was deposit return schemes or cycle lanes, which in some places are absolutely useless, and a problem of priorities. But what springs to mind actually here is I watched the other day, and I'm going off topic a bit, but the point might become clear. Alec Neil, a couple of years ago, Roddy, you had him on our show, and there's a really good clip of him going the rounds just now on Twitter or X, where he speaks for about 9 or 10 minutes about competent government and how it can be reintroduced. And what he said there was an absolute masterclass in how to run Scotland, because if you think back to when the SNP were elected in 2007 and then 2011, what Alec always harped on about was competent government. Devolution is an opportunity to show the Scots that we can govern ourselves from Scotland, in Scotland, and we can do it well. And that's exactly what he achieved. And she threw that all away. She didn't just, as Phil says, she was given the golden keys to the prospect of independence. She threw that away. But she also rubbished all the achievements that previously the SNP governments had made. So if you listen to Alec Neil, he talks very, very clearly and plainly and in simply incomprehensible terms about what he would do if he was in charge of the Scottish economy. So he talks about house building, he talks about renewables, about taking a stake in wind farms, he compares us to Norway, and he's absolutely bang on the money. And that's the greatest disaster of the Sturgeon almost imperialistic attitude that she had towards her governance, where she wouldn't take advice from the folk that knew what they were talking about. She went off on tangents, and she just made an international laughingstock of Scotland. But John Swinney stood by her throughout that. He stuck up for her. He had his redacting paintbrush out at every opportunity. He did his damnedest to keep her safe and secure and solid. And here we are, just because she's trying to sell a book, she's selling him out. So if she'll do that to the guy that stuck up for her through thick and thin, what the hell would she do to anybody else? I mean, she, as I said at the beginning, she described him as the closest thing to family and sold him out. So I look forward with interest to seeing what she's got to say, because we're recording this on Saturday morning. She's speaking at midday on Saturday when she's been interviewed at the Edinburgh Festival by Ian Dale. And the tickets for it started off at £18.50, but the price seems to have been reduced to £5.95. Thanks, Evelyn Airlie, for that. So that probably speaks for itself. You can go into Amazon and establish the price of paperback version of her book, because that's all she's doing, trying to make a bit of money for herself, as if she didn't have plenty already.
Yeah, and the great thing was when Alec did hand her the golden keys, she inherited a party, went on to win 56 out of 59 seats. She got 12,000 to turn up at the SECC the following, only a month after the end of the referendum. And I think the problem was always, ladies and gentlemen, she actually thought they turned up to see her. That was her problem. She didn't realise they were for the cause, not for her. She thought she was the cause. But here's the thing is, as we've alluded to, Terry, everyone under the sun who's been in touch with her, she throws them under the bus. And now she wouldn't give us any kind of plan B. And here it is, suddenly out of office because she's got a book to sell. Suddenly she's got a plan that she didn't give us before.
The first thing is, Phil said the sooner we stop talking about her, the better. I think we have to talk about her until it's out of our system, especially mine, because I feel very personally involved in this. When Nicola became the First Minister, I was distraught about Alex leaving. However, I was delighted that a woman was taking the place. I've said this before, and I thought she was such a great woman. And I was one of those 12,000 that went along to the NEC to see her. And I believed that I was going there to see her. I was going to see her. I was so happy to see her. And out she strode in her beautiful Louboutin tartan high heels, and she commanded the place. And it was very much like an American convention. We all had big hands to wave. These were given to, and things and bits and pieces, and it was thrilling, absolutely thrilling. And Alex came on and I cried, and Swinney came on and was resolute and strong about his new leader. And it was terrific. We had a terrific start, it seemed. And then we lurched from one horror to the next. We lurched from promises about another independence that will happen, another independence referendum, this, that, the other, plan this, plan that, plan the next thing. And then we got COVID. Now, that's when I really woke up to Nicola Sturgeon. I'd woken up before then because of all the trans stuff and all that. But this was the moment when she stood up and talked about COVID, and then she would pass it over to Jean Freeman to talk. And Jean Freeman knew her stuff. Jean Freeman was on the ball talking, and Nicola got cheesed off with it. Didn't like it because Nicola was stealing her thunder. So Jean was chucked. She was the first one I was aware of under the bus, the first woman under the bus. Nicola became the cult of the leader, the cult of the the personality who was the leader. Everywhere she went, it was Nicola only. Nicola only. When she turned up in Eyemouth one time in a big fancy, Nicola bus, she got off the bus, shoving people out of the way to go and see somebody who was holding a baby, to take the baby off it, to have her photograph taken in front of the crowds with the baby, because she was such a caring person. Can I just say my arse for that one? Because it just got worse and worse and worse. We had all the promises, we had the baby boxes, but at first you thought, well, that's great, that's a wonderful thing. And then you see them and they're cack in comparison to the Finnish ones. Then it's, we're going to give every child in the world a bicycle at Christmas. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do the other. We're going to have an independence referendum. Everything that was told we were going to get never actually happened. Or if it did happen, it was cackatooly. But Swinney supported her, absolutely supported her through everything. Now, why did he do that? Was it because of friendship? Was it because of loyalty? No, I think it's because he's a fearty, because she has information on him as well. She led him. And this business of he didn't have the big picture, he couldn't see things, etc., etc., everything was all cack and rubbish. She was the one telling him what to do. She was the one telling Humza what to do. In fact, when Humza stood up and showed a wee bit of backbone over Palestine, out he went. Right? And that was Nicola in the background doing that. And then Swinney became the wonder, what was he called? The best Scottish politician ever. Look, what? Nicola betrayed Scotland. Nicola betrayed independence. Nicola betrayed every woman who ever voted for her by being the creature that she has become over these years. And that business of not being able to see what dear old Mr. Murrell was up to, please. And now she's swanning around. She's got a lovely flat in London, which she's probably had for years, backed by, Westminster. And she's now talking about how the Greens were the ones who gave us hope. The Greens, are she off her head? The bit about even people who don't support them would respect them. Well, I don't support them, and the last thing in the world is I would respect them. They're worse than anything, in my humble opinion. I'm not as bad as Nicola. But there's so much about Nicola which is upsetting and devastating to every woman in Scotland. There isn't a woman in Scotland who doesn't feel this, I'm sure of it. There are ones who are still deluded with the cult of Nicola, but the majority of women, ordinary women. I have a friend who's not interested in politics at all. I think she spent too long with me. That's why she's not interested in it. And she said to me, I really don't like that Nicola Sturgeon now. And I said, why not? She said, oh, she's turned into such and such a thing. Why is she behaving like that? And I said, she's behaved like that the whole way along the line. And she said, oh, why? I said, because she's bought and paid for. And the light went on in her head. And she said, oh, I'd never thought about that. And I said, well, think about it now. The number of people I know, the number of women I know who have turned against Nicola, it's huge numbers. And you see all the time on Facebook.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what it'll take for people to finally get the message. You're talking about stepping off the bus with all her fancy gear and things and all that. I wonder how much of it was knocked off gear that her husband had bought. You just often wonder now. But
he bought
I wonder. I wonder what it'll take for some people. I know every day now when I'm looking at some thread on social media, I look, well, that guy's right, and I'm going to reply. Well, I can't reply, and I find out this is someone that's blocked me. People have blocked me. The day after I sort of left the SNP after 5 decades of unbroken service, shall we say, I started losing followers galore. I lost over 2,500. The amount of people that block you because you turn around and went, it's not working, guys. What they're telling us is a load of keech full. And that's what's upsetting them. And I'll be like Nicola Sturgeon. I can exclusively reveal. John Swinney had a reply, and I think it's worth noting. Now, I'm not, as everyone knows, I'm not John Swinney's greatest admirer. I don't think he's a bad man or an evil man or anything like that. I just don't think he's capable of taking my country to independence. And I don't think he's doing what he should be. But his response after this brutal attack by his so-called good buddy, who he's been protecting, was quite forthcoming when it came. And he started off by saying the First Minister, whether he'd spoken with his former boss about her public criticism. In her memoir, she said, it goes back to what I said, she criticised it for lacking vision and big picture thinking. Mary McCallan, as Eva alluded to, said she was wrong. Constance said it was incorrect. She kicked the arse out of it and said, John Swinney was the best ever First Minister. But what John said, and the people that were supporting him said, was quite simply this, Phil, that he just won his own mandate. So he won the election, whether we agreed with what he was doing and how he won it. He won the election. He got his mandate, and yet she was still criticising him. Betrayal off the scale.
Well, this is the problem. You've actually touched on the core of why everyone you've just listed are complete failures, because their mandate is not to get Scottish independence. That's the problem. He's celebrating a mandate which is not to get Scotland independence. His mandate is to keep the snouts in the trough of them, all their lackeys, and every single SNP, MP, member of the Scottish Parliament, and councillor in place. The councillors, least of which, because the councillors actually, if they're in power, run their council. If the MSPs are in power, they run what little powers they have in the Scottish Parliament. If the MPs are in power, they run Britain. SNP will never run Britain, have not run Scotland since Alex attained an independence majority for the SNP, but without relying on the joke that is the Greens and the councils. Well, quite often that's where local opinion comes into play much, much more. So it's the least affected by how well the political parties go. And there's more independence in councils than you can shake a stick at. But anyway, just some of the comments that we've just listened from Eva and Terry, I just had to come in on some of them. The Greens came closest. She is a Scottish Green indeed, Terry. Useless. And also, Terry's right when she says, she did it. She did as much for women as Thatcher did, in my view. I give them both credit for breaking the glass ceiling. That I applaud. But then what? Women's rights and promotion was instantly dropped, instantly, for the benefit of them and their wee cabal. That's all they cared about. I mean, when you look about the whole front and centre, because this is really what the criticism of John Swinney is about. Is it he didn't put SNP front and centre? Really? You were leader for 9 years, Nicola Sturgeon. How did you approach independence? Well, you didn't. You faced it when you were given those keys, as we talked about, and handed the baton, all the glory, filled halls, were on the march with Ali's army, here we go. And you took us to the Argentine and completely failed, because you actually, in fact, you know what? You didn't even take us there. He's about turned and faced the opposite direction and did not take us one step towards independence. That is the core to this. This is why she doesn't matter to me. She failed. She was captured by the British state. She's failed to deliver what Scotland wants. And this is the problem with every single one of these politicians we've mentioned. Constance, Swinney, Sturgeon, everybody except Alex. Alex took us to the brink. He took us to the brink of our greatest, of a victory, and handed the opportunity, the strongest part. He built a platform where we won 56 out of 59 and could easily have implemented independence through an alternative route by being bold and putting your job on the line like Alex did. He put his job and his political future on the line for the cause, because the cause came first. And he was a gradualist. He was sensible about it, but he got us to the point where now it's fight. The days of gradualism for me are over. We're now in the fight or flight mode, and the SNP, since Nicola, have been in flight mode. They just do not face up to what we want. So, you know, you look, I think it was the Independent, Craig Parton's article, I think it was just yesterday, that independence was not put front and centre, said Sturgeon. Well, as we said, what did you do when you were in charge? You didn't put independence front and centre. So with the exit poll, I think at the time he was talking about, retrospectively, the SNP could drop as low as 10 seats. And Sturgeon says, I think, this is on the election poll, I think one of the questions out of the SNP result tonight is whether they've left themselves between two stools on the independence question, because I think, in my view, it wasn't really put front and centre. That's what she said, after she failed to put it front and centre for 9 years. So the SNP decision to put its push for independence on page 1, line 1 of the manifesto gave the impression it was the big issue of the party's campaign, and voters have cast their verdict on that. You're the one, Nicola Sturgeon, that said independence is not on the manifesto. You refused to even talk about it. Page 1, the SNP decision put its push for independence on page 1. That hasn't happened since Alex Salmond. They only mention the word independence when you approach a vote, an election, and they weren't re-elected, to delude the existing good people of Scotland who still believe the SNP want independence. And that's the problem. They're liars, cheats, and thieves, and should be treated as such. But she said, and this is another quote from Hernick, but it was never followed through on a day-to-day basis in the campaign. We didn't hear day after day SNP spokespeople make the case of why independence was an answer to the big issue at the heart of the election campaign. That's what she said. Well, that sounds awfully like your 9 years of leadership, Nicola.
Absolutely.
You failed to do that as well. And, you know, and it's rich coming from you, and that's all you're interested in is becoming richer. You don't give a damn about the people of Scotland. You only care about yourself. We know about the key reasons why you were captured by the British state, and we know why you live in London. We know that you are not welcome, in my view, in Scotland. Again, we don't need traitors in our midst. Go off you go, son. Oh, off you go, hen. Or you jog. I mean, oh, how I laughed after 9 years of her so-called leadership. She singularly failed to take us one step closer to independence. Instead, focused on what? Fighting Brexit, putting Joanna Cherry onto that cause after England had voted and Britain had voted to come out. When we had Boris Johnson, Farage, and all these clowns in charge, a lettuce Prime Minister that was beaten by a lettuce. All of this was going on. And instead, she's fighting Brexit, championing the Recognition Rights Act, and taking the glory for the COVID debacle, as Terry pointed out from the excellent Jean Freeman. I mean, at the time, even I thought she was doing great. She came over really well. She's a good public speaker during COVID, and she seemed like the New Zealand leader to grabbing the bull by the horns and showing leadership. What we now understand is COVID was a bit of a con. There was it dangerous? Did people die? Absolutely, but there was too much about that. There was too much money made on this, and the billions that were stolen on PPE was part of the game that was played. So for me, how the hell is that going to help us unify, Nicola? How is your criticism of the SNP without putting forward a genuine case, a genuine, actual, workable plan for independence that you failed to implement in your 9 years in charge? And let's be honest, she's still highly influential within the Scottish government, but maybe, or should we call them the executive now? Because I think that's what they've proved to be. Maybe this is the final straw that will allow the Scottish government to move on. But I don't think so, because it's not down to personality. It's down to blackmail, corruption, who you know, and what you've got on everybody else. And if you've got the hooks into Nicola, you can be damn sure that the 77th Brigade, MI5, MI6 have got their hooks into the rest of the SNP leadership. They are also traitors and have sold us down the river.
Well, you mentioned gradualists and whatnot. Can I just say I was always a fundamentalist. I remain a fundamentalist. I lost that argument too, but I was right again there. I am a fundamental, will always be. And the other thing, you've got to remember, Sturgeon was the one that said in 2017, cost you and others their seats. A vote for the SNP is not a vote for independence. And 500,000 of our supporters sat at home. And it's been going on ever since. You know, that's the problem. And that amount of people sitting at home is growing all the time. Another question, but here's more of John's response, Eva, because it's fair that it should be mentioned. And he went on to say, during a visit to Broughty Ferry on Wednesday, he said the election campaign resulted in an SNP win. It resulted in the biggest gap between the SNP and our nearest opposition party since devolution. So I think on objective data, it demonstrates the SNP ran a strong, commanding election campaign. We got a big win. Where I've lost a big win from the people of Scotland, and I'm very pleased to have led that campaign. He added the SNP have just won the election and has commanded the confidence of the people of Scotland with an election campaign related to what I thought was the most important issues facing the people of Scotland. Now, whether we agree that they were the most important issues is not here nor there, Eva. He's got the victory to prove he was right and we were wrong. And, you know, so she's got a cheek attacking him.
Yeah, she's got a brass neck, but we knew that. The difficulty, though, is that John and those of us in the independence movement that desperately desire independence understand the damage that Nicola Sturgeon did to the cause. She didn't just fail to advance the cause, she took it backwards. Because if you think back to 2014, every election after that, what you had was an enormous cohort of the population that were voting SNP because they know they got competent government and they knew that the SNP had independence as the top priority. But we now have approximately 20% of the electorate who support independence will not vote SNP at the moment. They may never vote SNP again because of the damage that Sturgeon was primarily responsible for. So John did well winning that campaign, but in reality, the SNP lost seats, they lost votes. It was not actually a resounding victory, but it was a victory insofar as clearly they were the biggest party. But that's not good enough, because people in the main are not voting SNP because they want the SNP to run a devolved assembly or, you know, as Phil would say, a big council. They're voting SNP because they were promised action on the cause. They were promised if there was a majority SNP vote, which clearly there wasn't, but they were promised that if there was, there would be steps taken towards securing the consent of Westminster for a referendum. So we know that Keir Starmer refused it, and we know that so too does the new guy. And, you know, for the life of me, I genuinely don't understand what the SNP are actually playing at in the context of the independence question, because we've all got access to the internet, we've all got long memories, and in politics and in the independence movement particularly, you remember clearly forever the promises that were made and the promises that were broken, or the undertakings that were given and not fulfilled. So we had almost a year ago now a promise from Keith Brown on behalf of the SNP that there would be a convention on the right to decide. It's not appeared yet, but that convention has been being discussed by the SNP since Nicola Sturgeon's days. She was speaking about it in Brexit Day in 2020. We're 6 years down the road now. And if you put this in real terms of what that means, just even look at those 6 years of delay in advancing the independence cause. How much has Scotland lost over that period of time? How many billions came out of the North Sea and bankrolled Westminster's follies? How many billions came out of Scotland and bankrolled the money that's gone to Ukraine and elsewhere? How much has Scotland earned and lost How many people in Scotland have died prematurely and unnecessarily, whether it was because of poverty generally, or addiction, or substandard housing, or waiting too long on an NHS waiting list? It's not good enough to say our NHS is better than England. It's not as good as it should be. Our housing is not as good as it should be. Our education service is not as good as it should be. Attainment gap, minuscule improvements in the poverty attainment gap. You know, that was what Sturgeon was to have a record judged on, was what she did with the attainment gap, which basically boils down to very, very little. So if you look at the enormous potential of the people of Scotland, our resources that Simon spoke about last week, the greatest resource is our people, and it is. But our people are being held back. We're hobbled because we don't have a government that puts the people of Scotland first at every turn by pursuing the independence question. So I feel sorry for John that his old pals turned on him, but I'm not surprised. I'm dying to say, tell you, but the reality is that what John should be doing to carve his name in history is to unite the movement and create an election in Scotland that's a de facto referendum, surround himself with people like Alec Neil, whom I referred to earlier, who know what they're talking about, and recreate the competent government that we had between 2007 and 2014, because Scotland's crying out for that.
It just comes on. He really obviously is stung a wee bit by this, Terry, because if I could just finish adding what he's nearly popped the wrong picture there. In fact, I'm not putting up any picture at the moment. Get up. I don't want to say, there we go. He added, I enjoyed working for Nicola Sturgeon as her Deputy First Minister, and I delivered along with her significant improvements in the lives of people in Scotland. But I'm absolutely over the moon to have my own mandate that allows me to improve the lives of people in Scotland, and that's exactly what I intend to do. Asked if he'd spoken to Sturgeon about her comments, I'm not going to divulge my private conversations. Even at that point, he's still trying to cover for her. I just don't get it. Mind you, I'm more of an eye, two teeth, and an ear for an eye type of guy.
He is still covering up for her. He's still supporting her, etc., etc. But why is she attacking him? And this is my bizarre take on this one. I think that Nicola, in her cosy home down in London, etc., etc., is missing the limelight, because she's gone from being this great hero to suddenly being just some wee fat woman that drinks gallons of booze outside scoffing burgers, and she's lost that thrill of popularity and stardom. However, by attacking Swinney and his leadership of the SNP in the 3 years that she hasn't been there, does she now go, is this now going to be the second coming of Nicola? Nicola puts on a golden suit of armour and a wee hat with a feather and rides up in a white charger to save Scotland and to take us to another second secret plan. Is that what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen? But she's not. She's fallen from grace, and she's aware she's fallen from grace, and now she's attacking everybody and everything. And I think it's funny that Angela Constance is standing up for Swinney. Oh, they're all getting behind him now because they see that she's up to something really no good, the way she has done for years. And as I keep saying, I take her betrayal of Scotland as a very personal thing. When I think about Margot MacDonald, my God, Margot lit my fire, okay? I can't ever think about the SNP or independence without Margot. Can you imagine Margot being like that? Can you imagine it even for a second? No, she would have laid waste to somebody like Nicola Sturgeon. But the problem is that Nicola created a cult, an absolute cult, and she was like what is it they said about Hitler? What was his thing? Oh, colour queen. She was Empress Nicola Sturgeon. She was the the big boss of everything. And now she's not the big boss of anything. All she has is her scabby books that's called Frankly, which somebody said should actually have been called Cranky. And now she's writing a foreword to that, where she's attacking all the people who have supported her for years and years and years. That shows you what sort of person she is. However, she did say the other day that she's really comfortable down in London. It's nice to get the space and the distance for a while till things calm down, you know, until people stop remembering that she couldn't see a camper van and stuff. But she said, but she really has to come back to Scotland very often because her mother wouldn't allow it if she didn't. So she still really loves Scotland and still has a great for Scotland and really wants to see Scotland get No, you don't, you liar. You just want to see yourself get on and you want to be back to being Queen of the May. And that's all there is. That it's her drive for her own self-importance that took her from deputy leader to first minister. And when she got that power, it turned her head like the Exorcist, right? That, in fact, she became the Exorcist. Ding, finished.
Yeah, well, you say she's a cult. I say she's a right cult, and she's surrounded. Yes, she's surrounded by a shower of cults or something like that. Anyway, you know, and far be it from me to stick the boot in. I saw this on social media. I couldn't resist it, ladies and gentlemen. It's a beauty. And for those of you who watch Would I Lie to You programme, I once spent 400 grand of other people's money on jewellery, cosmetics and a camper van, and my wife didn't know anything about it. Would that be a lie? Oh, I don't know. Yeah. Couldn't resist that one. But the other thing that's coming up, Phil, you know, I say, what will it take? Now, there's the Greens are wooing her. They've heard the compliments, and she's been saying how great they were and how bad the SNP are. Could she? Would she? Would that be the final straw for the cult? Would that destroy the cult? Or would they just move to the Greens?
I think it's not sadly. It's an observation that people believe what they want to believe. It's invariable, and you can call it optimism, pessimism. I've travelled the world working, and there's a lot of dour Scots around the world, most of them in commercial positions, that say, it was like Corporal Jones at Dad's army, we're doomed, I tell you, they're all out to get you. You can't trust these buggers. And 99% of the time in international business, they're right, because that's how it works. But in reality, to criticise a nation or people, I mean, you can't do that because we're thankfully diverse. We're different characters, different strengths and weaknesses as individuals, but in Scotland. But for me, you can't blame folk for not picking up and reading. I mean, Eva mentioned it earlier that we've got, we've got the internet and we remember what they said, but the problem is nobody's that interested. Why? Yeah, we would like to know, but life is so hectic and busy at the moment, and it's so difficult for so many people that folk are just trying to get by. The majority of people, I mean, you've got your family, your job, you work to feed your family. The pressures that are on the financial situation with everybody's wages going down and costs going up, the injustice in this world, the corruption in this world, it's patent, that's obvious to see, the fact that mainstream media is lying to you constantly, and the fact that to go and find the truth, you have to go out there and find it, or not in the mainstream media. As you know, on my Facebook, I've got a massive list of people that I use to find, and what I've even noted the truth from, and even some of these names, what we're finding is the mainstream media, or the powers that control the mainstream media, are now generating false sites, or real sites, purporting to represent these truth speakers, and AI dubbing what they say and manipulating what they say to say either extreme nonsense of the position on the left, or switching to the right. So how can you work through this information? You can't do it easily, and the fact is most people are not interested in the accounts of a country. How many people know the 35 monetary and fiscal levers that you need to run an economy? And therefore, how can you possibly blame the SNP for trying to run a government that is effectively a devolved council. You don't have the powers to raise taxes. You don't have the powers to
Borrow.
do what or any of this stuff. Okay, and you know, and there's the classic. Eva mentioned it earlier. The classic. I looked up when Eva had mentioned it earlier because I like Jeff Aberdeen, and he was talking about Nicola Sturgeon's new book and all of this. Nicola's new book contains falsehoods at worst, fabrications at best, and that was when she came out with it first about her predecessor Alex Salmond, former chief of staff. Right, Jeff, who worked for Salmond, and we all know Jeff, when he was first minister, hit out at Sturgeon saying, "I was brought up that you didn't speak ill of the dead, but I think if you're going to speak ill of the dead, at least make your claims accurate." And that is the whole problem with Nicola Sturgeon. She skates over. She's been skating in very thin ice for a long time. It's starting to crack, and we see that with the distance between the numbers that vote for independence, which has been consistently over 50%, and the percentage that actually vote for SNP. Where are that 20%? Well, that's what everybody here and most of the people that listen to this programme. We're now aware that we need radical change with the SNP, and we need rid of the grifters and carpetbaggers to take us to where we want to be. It's an absolute disgrace, and the frustration we see from all of these questions and all of our responses is very simply, I never believe that John Swinney will ever change direction. He doesn't deserve to lead us. He lacks the gumption, the spine, and the moral virtue to stand up for Scotland's right, because you have lied and betrayed us. You don't did the Norwegians put Quisling in charge? No, you don't. You shoot the bugger. Now, I'm not advocating that, but that's traditionally how it used to be dealt with, you know. I mean, the traitors were hung, drawn and quartered, rightly or wrongly, you know, famously. But in the modern days, thankfully, we moved on and we're more civilized. Or are we, when you see the barbarity in Palestine and what's happening all over the world? So for me, I think it goes all back to one thing. We cannot rely on the Scottish Government as it stands to take us anywhere, because it's an executive and it's been captured. They've proven time and time again that their mandate is keeping their snout in the trough. It is not to get us independence. And Nicola Sturgeon accidentally pointed this out when she was trying to yet again throw everybody else under the bus except me. Oh, you know, I would have never have done that. She didn't actually say that she would put independence front and centre. She just criticised it as being wrong, and that her plan, well, a load of bollocks, Nicola. You're welcome to London, Hen.
Can I just say, you've said it's hung, drawn and quartered, not the thing. It's had a lot of bad publicity. I don't think it's had fierce. I think there's a place for hanging, drawing and quartering. But that's just me. I go back to being a fundamentalist. Treason and treachery. The clock's beating us. I'd like to move on to a few other things, if I may, Eva. And one of them is this. We're always, having a laugh. And I'm going to double question here. Labour in Scotland, the old branch office, it's come out. They're skint. They're needing, guess what? They need funded by London. They need a subsidy from London, unlike their nation of birth. So, they're in Scotland and they're saying, UK Labour pledge financial assistance to the Scottish branch as income plummets. Now, that's convincing that it is nothing but a branch office of the Labour Party in London, Eva. However, in the same week as the accounts come out for Labour, and they were bad, I mean, they're so skint, they make me look a sort of Jeff Bezos type wealthy guy. That's how skint the Labour Party are. And believe me, folks, I'm skint. But here is a list, and compliments to our friend, as we do so often, Wings Over Scotland. I've plagiarised this from Stu Campbell. And this is the money, the income that the SNP received, Eva. And if you look at it, folks, all of it's come from Westminster, from the Electoral Commission, from Westminster Electoral, whatever. We're bought and sold for English gold. Oh, what a parcel of rogues in the nation, is what our bard said, Eva. But it shows you why maybe the SNP aren't too keen on independence. And this devolution gig's no bad, because look at the money we're getting in. Now, that would be the cynic in me. Well, what about you?
Well, a few honourable exceptions, Phil being one of them, Joanna Cherry, Philippa Whitford being others. you find that SNP MPs and MSPs in the main are earning far more money as politicians than they would earn out in the real world. And I can't understand for the life of me why they're being paid big money as elected representatives and they're not making substantial contributions to the SNP's coffers. Because after all, the party exists and they're elected to attain independence. And, what greater achievement for your country could there be than that, to give others the opportunity to build the country that Scotland can be, realise our potential. So I'd be taking the Westminster money and running with it. I'd be putting it to good use. It wouldn't be about running the SNP as a political party for the next year or couple of years or whatever it was. I'd be using that money to publicise the cause and to do real work, whether it was, publishing papers about the benefits of independence, but doing it properly, like Jim Sillars and Yes United have been doing. Holding conventions, holding public meetings, encouraging everybody that supports independence to get together and show the strength that there is in the numbers of us who support it. I mean, the opinion polls have been consistent for a long, long time that the majority support independence. But because the SNP won't support a united campaign, the SNP don't get the majority of the popular vote. And that's then translated or interpreted by the unionists as showing that independence is not actually the favoured choice of the people. It is, but it's only going to come about if the SNP work with others. And if all they do is make themselves, in essence, an accounting unit of Westminster, take the Westminster money, have no independence campaign, people are going to say things like bought and sold for English gold and will refer to them as a parcel of rogues. And the only way around that is to take action to unify the movement and have a proper independence campaign. Talk to Angus Brendan McNeill, talk about collapsing the Scottish Parliament as he advises and creating that de facto referendum. But, it doesn't augur well for Scotland if even now at this late stage the SNP are not trying to create unity. Because if there were a de facto referendum and if we did vote for independence, I'd be really concerned about Scotland if it's the current SNP leadership who would be running the country. So for Scotland's sake now, as well as after there is an independence yes vote in a de facto referendum, the greatest and the best minds and the most capable, experienced and knowledgeable people have to get together to help to create the building blocks for our country as it's going to be. We cannot leave things as they are. I mean, earlier on, I googled Nicola Sturgeon on independence, and the top result was Nicola Sturgeon's full statement in June 22. I can announce that the Scottish Government is proposing that the independence referendum be held on Thursday, the 19th of October 2023. So here we are, 4 years after that announcement, and we're waiting to see what John Swinney's going to do. And the Sturgeon plan isn't a plan. She's basically just saying it can't go in the way it is. John Swinney's no saying anything. And all the time, the people of Scotland are suffering unnecessarily. That Norwegian oil fund that's worth how much? I mean, I don't even know.
2 trillion.
2
trillion.
I mean,
2 trillion.
How do you write 2 trillion? What size of number is that? What could you do with that money? What could you do with Scotland's resources? Whether it's, again, house building, national energy company. You could
tunnels to every island.
You could be giving everybody over a certain age free electricity if you felt like it.
Free gin.
Free gin. Bus passes for everybody. But there is so much that we could do if we had the leaders that were determined to fight for what our country really needs.
I'm hopefully going to come on to it if I've got time. But one of the things, and a big thing in America just now, Terry, is that they're complaining about APAC in particular, but Big Pharma as well, and other lobbying groups. Because if we say it in Scotland, don't we? He who pays the piper names the tune. Well, if the majority of all of the income for the Labour Party is coming from London, who are they going to speak up for? But here's the thing: £500,000 comes to the SNP from London. So who are they speaking up for? The Scottish independence movement or the people who are giving them £500,000 a year? It begs the question, whether it's a pharmaceutical or whoever is the lobbying. This is the British government who are lobbying, acting as lobbyists for the SNP, are they not?
It's all about money. Everything is about money in these things. Well, if I could afford it, I would hire a couple of folk to knock their pans in and fill containers filled with cake for me. That would be great fun. But I can't, so I've got to do it myself. But that's what's wrong with the SNP. They don't have to do it themselves. They get help from everywhere else. But I want to say one last thing about Nicola. It's just one thing, and it's about how I used to really, really admire her. I thought she was wonderful. We know that. I've got over it. And then I watched her being not the person I thought she was. And it was devastating. But the worst part of it is her lack of movement towards independence for those 9 years. And now Swinney, the pair of them have denied me the right to see independence. I'm never going to see it in my lifetime. And that's down to them. It's not down to me, and it's not down to anybody else or any of us. It's down to them. And they should take the blame for it. I hang, drawn, and quarter. Oh, that would be easy. I'd like that. That'd help.
See, you're getting round to my way of thinking. Hey, Terry, that's the way. The clock's beginning to beat us, Phil, but I'd like you to answer that as well. Is it not? If you're getting £500,000, and that's your biggest and your main source of income, why would you cut that off? That seems to be the way the SNP are viewing it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's £500,000 to Scottish Labour and SNP. Thanks again to Wings, magnificent as ever. All supported by similar structures. But this has ever been us. I mean, the Scottish Labour getting financial assistance from London to pay its bills. I remember back in 2020, and I had a quick check on it because I remembered it, because I knew Richard Leonard. This was in 2020, and he was presiding over an unprecedented collapse in the Scottish Labour's finances. And this, I dug out an old article by Tom Gordon from 2020 on this. And the Scottish Labour's newly published annual accounts, right, illustrated that it had been receiving financial assistance from UK Labour to help its bills, pay its bills for the last 7 months. Reserves slumping by 70% since Richard took over. And that the current budget is ensuring it was required from UK Labour, let's be honest, to meet its liabilities as they fall due. So without a lifeline, which was put in place for that year in 2020, Scottish Labour may not have adequate resources to continue its activity in the foreseeable future. It's not changed. It's not just now. This is how it works. That's how the system works. That's what we're up against. And, and you're looking at... Anyway, that's the answer to that question, I believe. And you're going to talk about Whisky, I hope, because that's a cracker too.
Well, I'm going to do... Actually, my next one up, I just wanted to put this up. Now, I'm going to put that... I'll let you have a quick on it as well, Phil, but we're running out of time, so I would like to go around the panel quick. But
yes.
Here's the thing that's got me. Scottish whisky success hailed as distillery numbers almost double. And there's John raising his glass. Yeah, we've got twice the amount of distilleries. Fantastic. And how much of the revenue from that, how much of the duty from that, how much of the wealth and profit from that does Scotland get, Phil? The answer, hee-haw.
Correct, nothing. And so what happens is, especially when you manipulate the numbers in GERS, so Whisky makes about 6 billion a year in the last figures I checked, okay? And 6 billion. And it goes to England and the big companies that make the whisky, like the big corporations that have bought out most of our distilleries. We can change that only if we take control of our own country. So he's celebrating. So what Swinney's out celebrating distilleries doubling in recent times, and this is true because the SNP hailed it the success of the Scottish whisky industry after fresh analysis showed that the number of distilling business in Scotland has almost doubled over the past decade, last 10 years. Now do you remember, as I do, Swinney sharing a whisky with the King in January of this year in the throne room at Holywood? And he was just recently tasting whisky at Deanston Distillery. So yeah, what are the facts? Distilling businesses, the number of them in Scotland has almost doubled over the past decade. And this comes from the Scottish Whisky Association, which is, for its name, its title, and even though technically it's based in Edinburgh, is the most Anglified organisation I've seen in a long way. It's shortbread tin tartan and Scots, but all the money and all the investment and all of it comes from the city. So it reported that there were around 190 distilling businesses in Scotland in 2016, which increased to 355 from to 2025, which is 87% growth, right? And this is notable in the Highlands, particularly, where the number of distilling businesses doubled from 25 to 50, an actual doubling. And in Perth and Kinross, 10 to 20, an actual doubling. Fife also saw big growth, and the distilling businesses increased from 10 to 30, and from 5 to 15. Moray, where the most distilling businesses in Scotland grew by 10%, by 50 to 55. But so yeah, we're right to celebrate whisky. It's a very Scottish product. But Scotland, other than a few jobs, it doesn't benefit from it.
Nope.
All the revenue that goes into the coffers of the Exchequer and to the big corporations that are not based in Scotland.
Yeah. Your arm could be twisted even to take a small drop of the crater. Great news that there's, that's twice the jobs, twice the distilleries. But I go back to my point. That money doesn't come to the Scottish nation or the Scottish people.
No, and I think what John Swinney should have been doing was celebrating the fact that the number of distilleries had more or less doubled, but pointing out the benefits of independence and what the whisky industry could mean to Scotland were we independent and did we have full control of the economic levers of our country, so that the people of Scotland benefit from events such as this, or developments such as this, where an economic success story can mean success for the country, not simply success for the Westminster coffers or the coffers of those corporate interests to which Phil referred. It's pretty straightforward, really, but it's just part of the bigger picture, isn't it? We're part of the United Kingdom and currently obviously governed by a Labour government. They're predominantly going to be favouring anything that maintains and retains the strength of the British Union and the warm enfolding embrace of the Union flag, etc. That's what it's all about. It's not about empowering the people of Scotland to use their own resources to realise the potential of this country. It's not about that, and it never has been, and it never will be. But I think last week and the week before, Roddy, we were speaking about the devolution of power down to the likes of mayors, or from Westminster to local authorities, to councils. And that's the sort of stuff that Andy Burnham's government's going to continue to try to achieve, so as to emasculate as far as they can any power that the SNP has whilst in control in Holyrood. And these are the sneaky developments to keep an eye out for, because that's the direction of travel at the moment, in the absence of a proper independence campaign.
Yeah. Here's the thing, numerous reasons we need out the union. One of the biggest ones for me is it moves further and further to the right, Terry, all the time. We're giving huge amounts of money, billions, and a 100-year commitment to a fascist regime in Ukraine. We're supporting the fascists and commit a genocide in Palestine. And it's now quite out in the open. Now, the Tories recently had to, neo-Nazi, well-known, caught in all sorts of things, had to quit as a Tory candidate because he was a neo-Nazi. But not to worry, mate, because head office took him, Kemmery, the leader of the Tory party, giving him a job as an advisor. So they're openly, brandishing their fascists.
I need to disagree with you there. He didn't
Please
have
do.
to quit as a councillor. He was standing as a councillor, and there was a huge outcry about him, and came to his side to stand for him. I listened to her on Radio 4. Yeah, I do listen to Radio 4. And I was listening to her on Radio 4 telling us how wonderful he was and how he's a redeemed character, etc., etc. What she didn't point out was that the following day, or later on that same day, she would offer him a job so that he would stand down. That's how he is now working for the Tories in a different fashion. He's won. That's it.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
He is not a redeemed character. He is the same creature he has always been. He's now in with his pals in lovely Toryland. Isn't that nice for him? It's all happy ever after, Roddy. I'm really chuffed about that.
All of the parties based in London, every one of them is to the right of Genghis Khan. Every one of them is just further and further and further right. That's the problem. But you know, there's something else that came out in the press this week, which we all knew in the National, dare I say it, that shows that the Labour does not exist in Scotland. Well, we knew that. The Scottish Labour Party is another con job. And if they lie to you about the name of their party, what else do they lie to you about? If they lie to you about the sex of an individual, what else do they lie to you about? Everything is the answer. Folks, we're running out of time. I just want to leave you with one thing. Now, it's an American action, and I was talking to my colleagues here about it earlier this week. Now, I don't know how many of you follow what's happening in the United States, but a guy called Abdul El Said is an American Muslim. Sounds as American as anyone. And he has put tremors, they say, through the Democratic Party and America, because he went up against an AIPAC candidate who was backed by AIPAC to the tune of $30 million. All of the media, all of the radio stations, all of the television stations were up against this guy. But the public in America have become more aware, and they voted for him and beat big money, beat the establishment. And the reason I'm telling you this is because we're up against a similar type thing, which is that all the media, all the broadcasters, all the radio stations, everything is against our movement, our country. But the public are wakening up. And if things happen in America, they tend to cross the Atlantic. And it will happen here. Keep the faith.
Can I come in just a wee bit on that?
You
just
can
just
indeed.
A quick comment. Very briefly, because first, know thine enemy. Who is AIPAC? It's the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And how many senators and congressmen are funded by them? The estimate is between 360 and 400. In the same conclusion, AIPAC and allied pro-Israel organisations were major funders in the 24 to 26 election period and funneled contributions to several hundred congressional campaigns, but available sources disagree on a single precise headcount. The best range is about 360 to 400. And Abdul El Said, this is a battleground in American politics. He beat Haley Stevens, who you say quite rightly is completely backed by AIPAC and had the media behind him. And Stevens, who pledged her support for El Said after conceding defeat, was backed by the Democratic establishment, including outgoing senators. The exact same establishment that is keeping Scotland on our knees controls all of our political leaders who are not really leading, they're actually sheep. And the SNP, Labour, and anybody that you think you're voting for to change things right now, unless we grab the bull by the horns and we take control of our party and our future, we will be controlled by the same people that control America, and God help us.
I've seen something today about Yvette Cooper. I can't remember. It's a huge amount of money. I think it's about 700,000 she's had from different donors. But ladies and gentlemen, the shame's going on here. There's Labour Friends of Israel. There's Conservative Friends of Israel. The Liberal Party Friends of Israel. Reform Party Friends of Israel. They are being funded by a foreign entity, a foreign government. No, why do you think the foreign government's sponsoring these? Is it for our benefit, our nation's benefit, or their nation's benefit? I go back to the money that the SNP and Labour are receiving from London, from different directions, but from London. So whose interests do they look after? And if our governments and our main political parties have been funded by overseas people, who do you think they are looking out for? Not us. We need out of this cesspit that is the union. It is a cesspit of corruption, dishonesty, warmongering, imperialism and lies. We need out. There, my wee rant's over. I've had my wee rant. Ladies and gentlemen, till we see you again, may you and yours take care. See you soon. Bye.
Do love a rant.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.